I spoke with each one and found we all had one thing in common. Someone close to us became enraged and unreachable after excessively listening to or watching right-wing media.
Joining me now is Jen Senko, documentary filmmaker who created The Brainwashing of My Dad, as well as the book by the same name. Jen, thank you for being here. Your documentary has been long recommended to me by friends who are saying you must watch this, must read this. It's so important to understand what Fox News is doing to people. What did watching Fox do to your dad? What was he like before? What was he like after becoming a regular viewer?
My father was almost like a prototype hippie. He was so open-minded. He was so kind-hearted. He was goofy. He loved talking to strangers because he knew about 7 different languages. So, he would talk to anybody he heard with an accent. But what happened is one day they moved. My parents semi-retired. My father got a part-time job with a long commute. And he found Bob Grant on the radio. Okay, so he was one of the first right-wing radio guys. And then after he fully retired, he found Rush Limbaugh. And then he fell in love, in man love with Rush Limbaugh. He would listen for 3 hours a day. And then he found Rush Limbaugh buddies, and one of his buddies introduced him to Fox. So it was like nonstop around the clock. And what happened is, he became a different person. It wasn't just his politics that changed. It was also his personality. He was miserable. He was angry all the time, enraged, and he became a zealot. He was like an evangelical, but he tried to convert us all to Republicans. And it really hurt the family relationships. And at one point, my mother wrote me an email and said, Jennifer, I might have to get an apartment away, separate from my dad. They got separate bedrooms. So it really hurt the relationship. I don't know if you want to mention this, but he was eventually recovered.
Oh, he did? Well, we'll talk about that. What got him to stop watching? Okay, so I think that this is really an important point because it says something about the power of media, especially right-wing media. So my parents moved again, and they moved to a senior community, and somehow in the movers broke his radio. So the radio ended up being in the garage. So when he would have lunch, he didn't have Rush Limbaugh. Immediately mellowed a little bit. He still had the emails, he still had Fox, so he was still kind of a jerk, if I may say, about my loving father. But another thing that happened is my mom got a new TV in the kitchen because it was really old TV, and she loved programming the remotes, right? So she had stickies all over the remote saying, press here, press there. And he didn't bother with it. So he just watched whatever she watched. And he detoxed. He started mellowing out a little bit more. Let me quickly play for you. This is what from your documentary talking about the liberal media myth. Take a look.
If you analyze news coverage, as FAIR has done, you find that the news tilts a little bit to the right. It's sort of center-right. Republicans usually outnumber Democrats. It's just pure math. And then people say, well, why do so many people believe the liberal media myth? If you keep handing opinion-shaping power to right-wingers who don't have evidence to yell about, the liberals who dominate, well, it's going to have some traction.
The liberal media, liberal bias.
Liberal media, folks.
Liberal press.
It is the liberal media.
I want you to talk about that, but I also want you to listen to the grandson of Andrew Lester, who sounds to me like his dad or his grandfather was like your dad. Take a listen.
I feel like a lot of people of that generation are caught up in this 24-hour news cycle of fear and paranoia perpetuated by some other news stations. And he was fully into that, sit and watch Fox News all day, every day, blaring in his living room.
To bring those two things together, because a lot of people will say, well, you know, all media is like that. All media is biased, and people are getting the same sort of rage from the quote unquote liberal media as they are from everyone else. But as you mentioned in your documentary, I don't know what this liberal media is. But what do you make of that? The idea that there are other people who are still being brainwashed by it, and this idea that people think that all the media is the same.
Well, first of all, the media isn't liberal. I mean, we all know that. If anything, it's corporate because it's run by corporations and you've got CEOs. But it really got ingrained in people. In fact, I was having lunch with a girlfriend the other day who's fairly liberal, and she called it the liberal media. I was like, no, it's not the liberal media. But also, I mean, there was an intention behind creating right-wing media. The intention was to turn viewers, to turn the populace into Republicans that would vote for in the interest of billionaires and not in their own interests, not in their own economic interests. And that's why they invented culture wars. So, yeah.
And I think it's worked. I hate to say, I think it has worked on far too many people. Thank you for doing this documentary, Jen Senko. Everyone should take a look at your documentary. Thank you very much. Coming up next, thank you. Coming up next, America's violent culture, from the not-so-serious violence showcased by the recently departed Jerry Springer to the deadly serious MAGA extremism of the Proud Boys. We're back in a sec.